Coach Tuesday interview. My name is Dave Savage. I'm the CEO of Mortgage Coach, and it's always a pleasure to do these calls. Some weeks I'm bringing in one of the nation's most successful mortgage professionals, and some weeks I'm bringing in an author, a leader, a speaker, someone special. So today that special person is Phil Black. We'll bring him into the conversation in about 3 to 5 minutes. Prior to bringing in Phil, I just want to remind everybody on this call that you are either among the nation's most successful top producing professionals, or you are striving to be that. Every time there's a list that comes out that says, hey, who are the nation's top 1% most successful, we always study that list and we go, how many of those guys are mortgage coach? How many of those girls, guys are mortgage coach? And it's always in the 30, 34% range. So, this is Kelly Zitlow. This is what it looks like when you come into her office to meet with her, to get mortgage advice, to understand how to make the right decision. So everybody on this call is already the best, or you're on your way to being the best. Our focus is to help families make a confident decision when getting into mortgage debt, and we want to do that in a way that helps them build wealth with real estate. So I'm super excited about a new product enhancement within Mortgage Coach. Our support page has been updated. I'm going to go ahead and show that on our website real quick. So if you go to the Mortgage Coach website, you click on Support Center, it's a new design. It's more simple. If you come here to learn how to do FHA loans, you type in FHA, it's going to make suggestions on the video assets that you need to do it. If you want to focus on the core Mortgage Coach app, you'd click there. On the rate watch here, and My Nest, our newest innovation, is coming soon. So make sure you acquaint yourself to this, because our goal is to help you be better, help you be more successful. We like to think that we help loan officers go from being a loan officer to being a trusted advisor. So we designed this new support page with that in mind to make it, call it Trusted Advisor Training with Mortgage Coach. So I'm going to bring Phil Black in 3 minutes. But I want to just see if the community has any questions for Phil Black. So if you do have questions, we are going to be able to dedicate a large portion of this call to Q&A. He's going to come in and provide a 20-minute TED Talk on what is grit, how to grow grit. But I would love, if you have questions for Phil Black, let us know. If you had not ever heard Phil Black, I think this is going to be a treat. This will be my 7th interview of Phil. The first one was on August 20th. In preparation for this call, I went back and went through all the interviews that I've done, and I've done a lot. And it was all about what can loan officers learn from a Navy SEAL by Phil Black. And I'm telling you, this call was awesome. He talked a lot about mindset. He talked a lot about preparation. He talked about what it would take to get through buds. So very, very special call. Also, I've interviewed him on overcoming call reluctancy. So that was a super powerful call. The price of leadership for everybody on this call that's a manager, an executive, a leader. Great call. Phil was on Shark Tank, and you'll learn a little bit more about his story in a minute when we bring him in. But the lessons he learned from being on the Shark Tank, I thought that was a pretty fun call. Managing your energy on this particular call. I also had Todd Duncan join us. So manage your energy with Phil Black, and just digging deep. So I think it's a great fit to be doing a call on grit by Phil Black. So Phil, I don't know if you've had a chance to join the call yet. Welcome to the Mortgage Coach community. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, thanks. Can you hear me?
We can hear you perfectly, and I am looking forward to your keynote on grit. I want to remind everybody who's a manager or an executive and you're doing sales rallies, Phil loves to come out and deliver impact and speak to large groups. So,
well, this is, thank you, Dave, for that intro, by the way. This is about 6 hours into the first day of Navy SEAL Hell Week. And that's me on the left and my buddy on the right. And he is whispering something to me. He's trying to keep it a little bit under his breath because there are Navy SEAL instructors swarming around us, and that was not the right time to be caught chit-chatting. And as I leaned over to him, he said something along the lines of, holy grit. Now, it may not have been exactly that. It may have been a derivative of that, and I will have to say that that is not probably the first and last non-social media appropriate exchange that my friend and I had during that week. But you will learn a little bit more about Hell Week in a few moments. Before I do, I'll just quickly go to the next slide, and ask a question, which is, how many people have heard of the Navy SEALs? I suspect the people on this call, I don't think you have too many international people, Dave.
No, we don't.
No.
Everybody is here, and I think everybody in the mortgage business knows who the Navy SEAls are, my friend. And by the way,
All right.
Phil, you're coming in and out just a little bit, so just be cognizant of that. It's not too bad that we need to change mics, but I did want to give you a heads up on that.
Okay. Well, let me know if it degrades any. Well, those.
Yep.
It sounds like everybody's pretty familiar. The Navy SEALs are the U.S. Navy's elite special operations, maritime-based commando unit. So it's a mouthful to get that one out there. They're also commonly known as badasses. I mean, these guys are the guys that do the most high-risk, challenging, dangerous missions in the world. They include, as you probably heard in the recent years, counterterrorism, counterinsurgency, shipboard search and seizure, hostage rescue. We typically work in small teams, almost always at night under the cover of darkness. Very little support, very little backup. We're pretty much on our own. And we're normally deep behind enemy lines and almost always in very inhospitable conditions. And as you all probably also know, they're also the guys that got Osama bin Laden over 5 years ago. And as you guys probably know, the Navy SEALs are at a very high, what we call op tempo, which is operational tempo. That is how often these guys are going out on missions, these high risk, high intense, dangerous missions. And it's often, I mean, these guys are going out so much these days. I often tell people, these guys go out on these missions as often as some of us go to Starbucks, once a day, twice a day, and they're really getting burned out. And it's become a huge people problem for the Navy Special Forces in particular. And there's a couple reasons why they're getting so burned out and they're going out over and over and over again. It's because they can't find enough people to get through the training, right? So I'm going to go through, I'll review. We got Osama bin Laden, we're superheroes, this op tempo where guys are going out too often, they're getting burned out. The Navy's having a big problem because they can't get enough people to backfill these guys, to give them some relief, get them off deployment, and just settle them down a little bit. And one of the big reasons is they can't get people through the training, and one of the big reasons is because of this. You guys see this bell?
We see the bell.
The bell is the quitter's bell, and when you go to SEAL training, it's what's called BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. And as soon as you walk through the quarterdeck, which is the Navy term for the little lobby area, you will see this quitter's bell front and center. And anytime during the training that you feel like you don't want to be there, you've got a sniffle, you're a little cold, you just don't really have what it takes, you've changed your mind, you walk up to this bell, you hold that little green lanyard, and you ring it 3 times. Ding, ding, ding. You take your helmet off, you place the helmet on the ground right below that, and you're out. No questions asked. So over time, you'll see 1 helmet, then you'll see 2 helmets, then you'll see 3 helmets, and your helmet has your name on it and the class number. And these helmets over time will start to build up. I've seen almost 100 helmets in a row right underneath this bell. Now, mind you, this bell and this option to quit is not just when you're in the particular compound. When you go out on your long open ocean swims, that bell will be behind you in a safety boat. When you go out for your long runs, your deep sand conditioning runs, 6 or 7 mile runs, that bell will be behind you in an ambulance. So at any given time, if you're willing and able to, you walk over there and you ring that bell and you're out. Now, between ringing this bell and people getting injured, people changing their mind, people not passing an academic test or a physical test or some number, the attrition rate at BUDS, which is the number of people or the percentage of people who don't make it through training, who fail to make it through training, is 80%. So that's a pretty big number. I mean, if we go through training at BUDS with 500 people, by the end of the year, that's only 100 people left. I mean, the Navy needs hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of guys to get through here, and this type of attrition is part of the process, but it's also part of the problem because we just can't get enough people out on the line. So the Navy basically has 3 options. They can make training easier, they can reduce the standards, They can make hell week a heck week. They can make it a hell day. They can make it a hell half an hour. They could just make it a little bit easier. You have to do fewer push-ups. Your run times don't have to be as strong. That typically gets dismissed pretty quickly because of the types of demands on our jobs. So that's on the table, but it usually doesn't happen. The second option is to cast a wider net, find more people, spend more money in marketing, spend more people trying to get more people on the front door, so that even with an attrition rate of 80%, you still get more people through the back door. And then lastly, the option is, how do we find better people? How do we get people who are a different breed, people who are going to reduce that attrition rate from 80 to 70 to 60, something other than this high attrition rate? What can we do to find new people? Now, what that has caused is the Navy SEALs to become the most tested, prodded, poked, studied, evaluated group of military people of all times. We have doctors, we have psychiatrists, we have psychologists, behavioral experts, anthropologists, primatologists, you name it. They're coming in, spending millions of dollars for decades, gathering data to try to help them figure out how to increase the success rate, or we're trying to figure out why 80% of the people are quitting, or why the 20% are making it through. And there have been all kinds of theories. Some theory a couple of years ago was we needed people who had more endurance. So we're going to go after the triathletes of the world and the marathon runners of the world. And then it switched over to, no, we need people who are more comfortable in the water, because we're getting people who are failing during the dive phase. So we're going to get water polo players and swimmers. And next it was, we need people with more military experience. So they go into the enlisted ranks with people who have a couple more years on. Then it was people who were exposed to cold water when they were younger. So they're flip-flopping all over the place, trying to find what the key ingredients were to help increase or decrease the attrition rate. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to a master chief who was in charge of BUDS, in charge of our training, and we were chit-chatting, and we got to this BUDS issue, and he said, I was talking about the attrition rate and how we're going to get more guys out there, and he said, oh, you haven't heard about this new facility? And I said, no, what do you mean new facility? He said, well, the Navy's finally putting money where their mouth is. They were sick of not getting enough guys through. So they built this multi-million-dollar, tens of millions of dollar facility. It's got Olympic-sized pools. It's got Olympic running coaches, swimming coaches. They have physical therapists there. They have sleep experts. They have everything to get these potential candidates in perfect shape. And this facility, guys who want to become Navy SEALs, they go to this facility before they go to BUDS. So it's basically a pre-training. They go through this program for 2 months, and then they show up day one at BUDS. And, you know, I think part of the reason was that a lot of times people who want to be SEALs, they're in the Navy already, they're out on a shift deployed, and they just don't have the opportunity to run, to swim, to do obstacle courses, to prepare themselves physically for this particular rigorous training. So they stood up this new command, and they have these students now going through this pre-training. I was getting very excited, of course, because I'm like, man, I wish they had that when I went through. When you show up at BUDS at day one, you are basically like an elite Olympic athlete. And I started asking him, I said, well, Chief, you know, Senior Chief, what has that done to the attrition rate? You know, is it 70? Is it 60? Or are half the guys getting through BUDS now? And he looked at me very matter-of-factly, and he said, it's the same. I said, it's the same. How could it be the same? You know, these guys are being so perfectly instructed and perfectly built. They're like robots. How are they not getting through in higher numbers? And therein lies the trait that we're going to talk about here, and what I particularly believe is the trait that gets people through BUDS training, you know, regardless of all those tests and all those theories and all those trends. And that particular trait happens to be grit. Now, I have my own definition of grit, and we'll pull this apart toward the end. But my definition is, number one, an uncommon ability. So right off the bat, you get 70% of the people who don't really fit this bill. Most people are common. That's the definition of the word. So if you want to demonstrate grit, you have an uncommon ability. And the uncommon ability is to endure inevitable failure and adversity. And let's think about the language there. Number one, to endure. How many people like the idea or does enduring something sound like fun? Of course not. Enduring something means you just want to get through it and you just have to push through it. You want it to basically end. But in this case, these people have the ability to endure inevitable. Inevitable means, oh, you're not just going to get a pass. It's not going to be hard for a little while, or maybe you'll luck out and you'll be in a buds class where it never rains, or you'll be in a buds class where the water's warm. It's inevitable that you're going to face failure and adversity. Failure and adversity. Who would like to sign up for a program where you must endure inevitable failure and adversity? And we take it one step further. It's not only inevitable failure and adversity, but it's over time. It's not just a one-shot deal. And I specifically remember our buds instructors would tell us, you guys think you're cold now, it's going to get worse. And it did get worse. So you're basically signing up for this type of job where it's going to be inevitable failure and adversity almost indefinitely, at least as long as you're in that type of career. And people do it because they want to succeed in the mission, and a mission is bigger than themselves. It's not just I saw it in a newspaper and I want to pound my chest and I want to tell everybody that I was a Navy SEAL. That doesn't work. I'm a big Studley water polo player and that seems like a cool thing to do. I'm going to try it. That doesn't work. So this is my definition of grit, and I'm going to try to share with you now my story of going from an out-of-shape, overweight investment banker to a Navy SEAL to try to bring a little bit of life to these words. This is me as a 19-year-old. I'm early days in my college career, and I was not particularly strong. I'm 190 pounds, 6'7", no military background, not overly athletic, not what you would think of as a typical prototype Navy SEAL. I did have occasion, however, since I was on the basketball team, to go out to San Diego. And San Diego is the home of the Navy SEALs. And during that trip, it was a 5 or 6 day tournament. One of my teammates had a brother who was a Navy SEAL. And man, when I got my hands on him, I didn't know much about the SEALs at all, but I was here on this basketball trip, and I asked him every question in the book. And I was fascinated. Everything about the travel, the lifestyle, the training, the culture of the SEAL teams. And I was completely entranced. Now, I didn't think for a second that I would ever become a Navy SEAL or that I could, but that didn't stop me from studying, from reading every newspaper, every magazine, every book, watching every documentary, every movie. I was hooked. I became a classic, in the closet, wannabe Navy SEAL. And that lasted for a while. That lasted for about 4 or 5 years. Ultimately, I left and I graduated from college and I went to Wall Street. And I worked for a big investment bank called Goldman Sachs. And the first day I showed up at Goldman Sachs, I had my tie nice and tight, nice tight collar. And I was there for 18 hours that day. And I'm like, man, they weren't kidding about these hours at this Wall Street job. Man, this is some rough stuff. So the next day comes, I'm there for 18 hours a day again. And then the next day and the next day and the next day. So 18 months later, I had been working 18 hours a day without one day off, 18 months straight. And at that point, I was getting out of shape. I was overweight. I was starting to get burned out, starting to get disillusioned. And finally, one of my little office mates finally saw that I was taking a day off. And they say, hey, Phil's taking a day off. Let's go skiing. So I was reluctant at first because as a basketball player, always typically in the wintertime, you're in season, meaning you're playing tournaments and practice, and you don't really have a chance to go on a family ski trip or the school ski trip or whatever it might be. So I decided to go. I wanted to be a team player. I'm finally getting out of the office, wanted to bond with my friends. So I go skiing, and that did not work out so well. Number one, I'm out of shape. I'm not a great skier. And the second run down the slope, I fall down like a ton of bricks, and I blow out my shoulder. So I need surgery. I need open surgery with staples and metal and not arthroscopic surgery, but a real pretty significant surgery, which was not fun. I get all stapled back up. I get this big sling on. I get one of those big pillows under the arm, and I start waddling back to Goldman to continue with those 18-hour days. Now, I did that for quite a long time, and there was one day in particular that I was walking home. It was about 2:30 in the morning, and I had my briefcase, and I had my big sling, and my arm was throbbing, and I stopped at the corner of Wall Street and Liberty Street, and I put my briefcase down, and I looked up, and there was an unbelievable starscape. Now, if you live in a city, you know that typically when you're outside at night, there's a lot of ambient light, that the stars don't look particularly brilliant. But for some reason, this night was different. Now, I walked to and from work every day, always in the dark. And something moved me to look up, and I see these stars out there, and they're glistening. And I look myself up and down, and I see this sling, and I just have this epiphany, this moment to myself, and I said, what am I doing? Where is my life going? Is this what I really want to do? Is this what I was meant to do? Is this what I'm really particularly interested in? And then I finally asked myself this question, which is a scary question. Well, what if? What if I could do anything in the world? I felt like I was at this rock bottom point. What if I could do anything? And as scary as that question is, the answer was even more scary, and it came quickly, and it was to be one of these guys. I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. I'd wanted to be one for, at that point, over 6 years. And I secretly was studying in the back of my mind, working through this Wall Street job, but really wanted to do something else. So that night I decided, picked up my briefcase, that I was going to go from a wannabe to a will be. And I walked home, had a little spring in my step, got home. Next morning, I made an appointment with a partner at Goldman Sachs to let him know that I was leaving Goldman Sachs to become a Navy SEAL. And you can imagine how that conversation went. It was interesting, to say the least. And then I called my mother, and I said, hey, Mom, little news update for you. Mind if I move home? I am leaving Goldman Sachs, and I am going to move home to become a Navy SEAL. So you can imagine how that conversation went with my mom. Neither one was particularly comfortable, but I did move home, and I did begin this process of this quest to become a Navy SEAL. And it was anything but easy, of course, because as the bright guy that I am, I woke up the next morning and I said, wait a second, Navy SEAL, that means I probably need to be in the Navy. So that was a big revelation to me. So I started walking around and knocking on doors of recruiting stations. Hey, my name's Phil Black. I'd like to be a Navy SEAL officer. And they laughed and they kicked me out. They called me and they told me to go check out the Air Force. And they said, you're too tall. And they said, look at your shoulder. That's never going to pass the med boards. And they said, you're a civilian? Maybe officers we don't take people from the civilian world. We take people from Annapolis, the Naval Academy. We take people from ROTC. Sorry, no openings. Sorry, too competitive. Doesn't look like you're that type of guy. Sorry, try somebody else. I went to over 30 different recruiting stations. And at this point, I'm living in New York. I'm starting to go to different states. In fact, I took a trip out to Oregon, and I went to a recruiting station. I took a vacation out there. I went to a recruiting station in Oregon to see if they had a different answer. And the answers were all the same. Sorry, no, can't do it, won't do it. Of course, all this time I'm rehabbing my shoulder, getting it back in force, trying to get back into shape, trying to keep my spirits up, getting doors closed left and right, starting to wonder, am I making the right decision? I'm networking with everybody I can get in touch with, my physical therapist, the doctors, my friends, my family. And at some point, I get a phone call from this captain, this retired Navy SEAL captain, who puts on these tests, these physical fitness tests for aspiring SEALs. And he says, hey, Phil, this is Captain so-and-so. We talked about 2 months ago, and you expressed this deep desire to become a Navy SEAL officer. And I raised my eyebrow. I was really unsure about you. But I have some news for you. The Navy is opening up a pilot program, and they're going to accept 2 guys like you, 2 civilians who don't have any military experience, and they're going to send them to BUDS training. If you're interested in that still, I suggest you come up and watch one of these events where we put people through their paces and you have to do push-ups and sit-ups. And I suggest you come up here to see the competition that you're up against, because guess what? There are a lot of guys who want one of those spots, and you're going to want to see it. So, of course, I was very excited, and I took the 2-hour trip to Connecticut, and I made it in about 45 minutes. I was so excited to go up there. And I stood there, and I watched these guys go through this particular test with rapt attention. And the captain said, "You see that guy over there? Watch him. He's the best in the country. If you have any shot at doing this, you're going to need to get at least as good scores as this guy gets." So of course, I am writing down every detail every moment this guy moves. I watch every single thing that he do on a swim, on a run, on push-ups, on pull-ups, on sit-ups. And now I'm looking at my notes, and I said, this is what I needed. This is my plan. This is my blueprint. So I went back home, and I started working. And I started working, and I started slowly getting the shoulder better and better and better. And I started getting closer and closer and closer to those numbers. And ultimately, I didn't want this window to close. So I finally picked a date on the calendar where I was going to take my test. And the test was going to be held at this YMCA in Connecticut, where I saw all these other guys take their tests. So 3 weeks before my test, which was in September, I drove up there to do a little walkthrough, a little mental walkthrough. I'm a big visualization guy, and I said, with 3 weeks left, I'm going to go through every one of these evolutions in excruciating detail in my head. So I show up, and I go back to the pool area in this YMCA, and the pool's empty. And I said, whoa, how is the pool empty? I need to go find the facilities guy. So I walked around, and finally I bumped into the facilities guy. And I said, hey, sir, this pool is empty. I'm taking my Navy SEAL fitness test here in 3 weeks. And he said, oh, no, that's not going to happen. You're going to take your test over at the high school down the street. There's a nice 50-meter pool over there. I'm not going to have this done in time. So I shuffled away, a little bit disappointed, and I sat down in the lobby of that YMCA, and I started doing some math in my head. And I realized at that moment that this was not going to happen. There was no way I was going to do the swim at that 50-meter pool. If there are any swimmers in the audience, maybe you watch some of the Olympic swimming, but the importance of the streamlining kick off the wall, I knew very, very well. And by that I mean, if you can imagine this, when you're in the water and you're at the end of the pool and you kick off the water and your hands are over your head and you're streamlined, it's the fastest point during your swim. It's also the most efficient point of the swim when you're basically like a pencil darting through the water. So I thought to myself, the 50-meter pool is not going to have a lot of flip turns. The 20-yard pool, which is what the YMCA pool was, I'm going to have almost double the number of flip turns. So I wanted, and I had to have that number of flip turns because that was going to get me faster and more efficient and using less energy. So I picked myself up, I walked back to the facilities guy, and we had a little conversation, so to speak, and $300 later, he guaranteed me that he'd have the pool done in time. So obstacle number one was resolved. The test was going to be back at this pool. Then I walked outside, and I saw the pull-up bar that I needed to do 30 pull-ups on. And I get on the pull-up bar, and I'm a taller guy. I'm 6'7". My knees are just about scraping the ground below me when I'm at a full extension. That was not going to work. If you can imagine you having to hold your heels up behind you while doing a pull-up and try to max out on your pull-ups, way too much energy. There's no way I was going to keep my heels up behind me. I would do probably 6 or 7 fewer pull-ups than I would if my legs were straight below me. So if we fast forward 3 weeks, the night before my test, in all blacked out hat and basically like a uniform, I climbed over and scaled this 20-foot fence at the YMCA, and I dug a 3-foot ditch below that pull-up bar so that when I did pull-ups, my legs would be hanging straight down and I wouldn't have to bend those legs up. So then I scurried back over the wall, got a little bit more sleep, showed up the next day for my particular test. And I was all jazzed up. I was all shaved. I shaved all the hair off my body to be even more streamlined. And I got in the water with a bunch of other guys who were there, who all looked pretty intimidating. And the gun went off and we started our swim. And as planned, I pushed off a wall, streamlined, took one big intense pull, and then glided the rest of the way, and I was at the other side of the pool. Touched the wall, took a breath, did the same thing on the way back. My head never once breached the surface during my 500-meter swim. So I get out of the water a little over 7 minutes, and the captain's looking at me, and he said, well, you're done? I said, yeah. He said, I've never seen anyone swim that fast. I'm putting your time down here. I mean, I never even saw your head come out of the water. And I said, yeah, that was my strategy. I really wanted to streamline and conserve energy. He's like, all right, you're going to have to wait till these guys are done. So, of course, now I have more time to recoup. I'm regathering energy. I'm getting a little drink, and I'm settling down for the next few evolutions. So the next evolution comes in, it's push-ups, and I do my push-ups and sit-ups, and I do my sit-ups. I'm right on target. And then, of course, I saunter over to my pull-up bar, and the captain who's administering this test, he's shaking his head, kind of laughing and smirking a little bit. I think he knows what the deal was. I get on that pull-up bar, but before I get on that pull-up bar, I put some sap, some tree sap on my hands. And the reason I do that is because having tried this so many times in the past and preparing and practicing, I know that my hands are going to be slipping off that bar. It's too much energy to have to hold on to that bar with wet hands. So I put some sap from a tree on my hand so that when I was holding on to that bar, my hand was basically stuck to the bar. So I finished my pull-ups, got my 30 pull-ups, pulled my hands off the bar, and walked down to do the final thing, which is the run. Now the run, I'm not a particularly great runner. And at that point, we're all gassed. I mean, completely gassed, because when you put out as hard as you possibly can on each one of these different events, by the time you're at the end, you've gone to failure already for probably, by that time, 20 minutes or so, you are smoked. And we have these big combat boots on, we have long pants on, and we get to the track. Now, the track is a regulation track at a high school, and we're supposed to run 1.5 miles at a 6-minute pace. So my target was to do this run in 9 minutes. And I knew that I was going to be a little bit iffy on it. So the gun goes off, and we're all lined up, and we start running. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this civilian guy with red shorts and a white shirt, he comes running, and he runs right in front of me. Well, some of the guys, the other SEAL wannabes, were way far ahead. They were sprinting. And then there were a couple of guys behind me. This guy runs right in front of me. Well, nobody else knows who he is, but I know who he is because he's my friend. And I had this guy and asked him as a favor, would he come to the track and run a 6-minute mile pace for 1.5 miles? He's a track guy. And he's like, oh, yeah, I can dial that in. I know exactly how fast to run to do 9-minute 1.5 miles. So in my mind, all I had to do was keep up with him. I said, I don't want you slowing down. I don't want you going faster. I want you to go exactly the right pace and leave it up to me to keep up with you. So he starts running, and I'm constantly like a yo-yo, catching back up and catching back up and catching back up. So the guys that went far ahead of me, they start falling back because they went out too fast, and they start fatiguing. The guys behind me who are trying to conserve energy, they never catch up to me. So I come in with my guy, and I get the time on the run that I needed to get. So between the run, these times on this test, and interviews, and an application, and a resume, and all these things put together, I'm one of the 2 guys that gets picked to go to BUD/S. So I go down to Pensacola, I become a naval officer, and then I show up at BUD/S on day 1. Now I'm going to refer back to that Hell Week. Hell Week is typically week 7 or 8 within a 6-month Hell Week or 6-month BUD/S class. So this is us at the start of Hell Week, about 6 or 7 weeks in. You can probably tell who I am if you're seeing this slide. I'm in the back left over there. And Hell Week, you don't really know when it's going to start. It starts on a Sunday. It's a week long. You basically don't sleep for a week. You're lifting boats. You're running with logs. You're doing PT. You're eating at midnight. You're in constant motion and constantly wet for an entire week. But the first day, which is Sunday, you don't really know when it's going to start. So everybody's on edge. We're watching Braveheart. We're playing cards. We're just joking around, but anything you hear, any little noise, you're always turning around like, well, is it starting? Was that it? What's happening? So, of course, hours go by, and we're fatigued, and we're trying to keep our energy up. Eventually, we figure it out. Eventually, we know that it started, and it's pretty gnarly when it starts. There's machine gun fire. There's grenades going off. There's smoke. There's gas. There's yelling. There's screaming. There's absolute and complete chaos. In fact, the first 15 minutes of Hell Week, I hear people ringing the quitter's bell. Ding, 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 ding. Now, at this point, I'm not sure if they're smart enough that they're doing little psychological operations on us, and people are not really quitting, but they want us to think they are. But there were actually people, I think there were 12 or 13 people, who quit in the first 15 minutes. So when you think about how motivated these SEAL candidates are, and you think about how much they've been through to this point, how much they know about what's coming, and they're still quitting in the first 15 minutes. So that's just an indication of how intense this is and how they try to approximate real combat conditions the best they can, obviously, with some limitations. So we move on, and then we start with these logs. And these logs are heavy, a couple of them are a couple hundred pounds. With me as a taller guy, I have a lot of that weight on my shoulder. We take them in the water. We do sit-ups with them. We run them up and over these berms. We go on conditioning runs with them. We do sit-ups with them, on and on and on. The next thing we look at is open ocean swims. We are out in the Pacific Ocean. It's cold water. We're doing multiple mile swims with no wetsuits, frigid, solid, frozen cold in this particular picture. And then, of course, the boats, the dreaded boats. These boats we carry around everywhere. Everywhere we go, the instructors fill them with sand. They fill them with water. They turn them over. They flip them upside down. We have to run everywhere with these boats on our heads. And you can imagine when you're running with the boat on your head, how it basically rubs raw the top part of your head. You get a bald spot after Hell Week typically because of this boat banging and banging and banging. You run to the chow hall. You run everywhere you go. You run with these boats. Now, in my particular case, the bald spot was on the back of my head because I was so tall that I had to lean over, and the back side of my head is where I had my bald spot, which was not fun and didn't do wonders for my neck either. This is what we call the elephant pits, and you could see on the top row back there. You could probably see who I am, the guy in the middle who's a head taller than everybody else. This is starting to wrap up Hell Week, and you're trying to get across those two ropes, and there's instructors on either side whipping those ropes back and forth, and you land in that disgusting, flesh-eating, basically sewage dump there. Nobody ever makes it through, but it's one of the last things that I found out that you do during Hell Week. And eventually some of us made it through, and you'll see here, this is a gathering of the 19 of us who started and gathered all the way through. We started out with over 180, and this is us with about 19 of us who were originals, who were all gathering together. And obviously you can imagine what we felt like there on that particular day. And then, of course, they sent us back, and we're licking our wounds, and our hands are just smoked from standing up for a week. You have really thick, all the swelling gets into your hands and into your feet. You can't even fit a credit card in between your toes. I have these boils on my hips from the rubbing of the belt and the life jackets and the sand, that those have to be drained. It's just a mess. And this is me right at the end of Hell Week. And I will tell you that the 19 of us who made it through, we were certainly not the most fit. We weren't the strongest swimmers. We were not older than everybody else. We weren't all triathletes. We weren't all endurance athletes. We weren't all water polo players. We didn't all have blue eyes. We didn't all have military experience. But we did have that one trait. I can tell you to a person, we all have that one trait, and that one trait is grit. Now, I know, I'm guessing, Dave, that it's pretty safe to say that most of your audience will probably not get off this call today and become Navy SEALs. But what I hope it's done is raise some interesting questions and have people think a little bit about maybe where are they on the grit scale? Where is their team on the grit scale? Whether it's personally or professionally, how far are they typically willing to go in a particular endeavor? Do they have what it takes to sustain effort over time and to be patient? And I think it's an important question because, as you know, you guys are living it. The mortgage industry is not for the faint of heart. The speed of change, the technology, the innovation, the markets, the industry changes, of course, the political winds these days, the competitiveness. Now, it seems to me, and I'd love to hear what you guys think, that to be successful, you almost have to be gritty if you want to be good, which the people in your particular group are, or they're strivers, they want to be good. Those with grit survive. Those with grit have patience and not complacency. So I'll throw the question out there. Do you have an uncommon ability? Does your team have an uncommon ability? Are you willing to endure that inevitable failure and adversity, which I know in your industry comes fast and furious? And are you going to do it for a long period of time? A lot of people in that business for a short period of time, and they They don't feel like everything's working out, so they bail out. And do you have a mission that's bigger than yourself? This is also another big one. There's typically something tied other than one particular facet. There's something bigger, something outward, something that we look outward to actually make us get through this. And I have a final slide here, and then we'll open it up. Navy SEALs have a nickname. The nickname is Frogmen. And this is one of my favorite images. And this frog is obviously having a tough day. And I will tell you that faced with a mission, a Navy SEAL will never, ever give up. And I think this frog is doing the same. Now, I have a pretty good idea what the frog's saying. I feel like I speak frog. The crane, on the other hand, I'm not really sure. I don't really speak crane. But if I had to guess what this crane was thinking, it's probably something along the lines of holy grit.
Great.
That's all I have, Dave.
Well, we got a lot more. We have time for questions. What an awesome story. And as you kind of got to the punchline there around grit, I couldn't help but think, as a mortgage professional, it's not easy. There's a lot of prospecting. There's a lot of rejection that they have. And when I think of the most successful mortgage professionals, I've never tested them for grit, but I think they all have grit. You cannot be super successful in the mortgage business and not have grit. Maybe the combination of physical, mental, it's not life or death like a Navy SEAL, but to put up with what happens when you go meet with realtors. The majority of them either don't return your phone calls or they don't take meetings with you. Whatever you're doing to prospect, you have to have grit to be successful. So Phil, let's get into some common questions, because I want to help everybody, if possible. So that's the first question. Can you grow grit from your perspective, and can you grow the grit within a team? What are your thoughts on that?
I think you can. In an ideal world, the grit grows from within. That's typically the fastest way. But there are people who sit back and they say, well, I get bored and I'm not really sure what to do, or I do it for a little while and the fire's not there. So there are a lot of things that people throw up, a lot of obstacles that people throw onto themselves. They have that little inner voice that they're wondering, why have I not found that thing that is going to light me up, that fire, that Bunsen burner that's going to get me up every morning. But I will say that I think grit can grow over time, and I think there are some things that, especially as leaders, that you can help people, quote unquote, find grit. And one of those things is to get really good at something. Now, oftentimes the fact that we're not either engaged or we don't necessarily love something is because we haven't really gone to that next level. We haven't dug in deep. We haven't put our full force and full effort into figuring out the little intricacies, or the studying more, doing things like these phone calls where you're getting into it more. Because sometimes the inspiration, the interest, and the passion for something doesn't go until you get to a couple layers deeper, not just the surface level. I'm gonna put this package together. I'm gonna fill out these forms, and I'm getting pretty good at the administrative stuff. But I haven't gone that layer deeper to become a world-class expert, so to speak, by putting in that time and that practice. And I call it being good, but not being nuanced good. And by nuanced good, I mean being able to look, and if you were in a prospecting call, or you were in a meeting, or trying to sell somebody a mortgage, or whatever the case may be, and you're with somebody who's really good, at some point when you get good enough, you can see the tiny little things, whether it's a mannerism, or body language, or a certain language that they use, or some type of sales thing that they use. When you get very good and you study this, you start to appreciate those things. So getting not only good, but nuanced good, meaning you're seeing the second, third, and the fourth layers of greatness. The other thing is sometimes surrounding yourself with other people who are interested in this particular industry, whatever the industry might be, whatever the job might be. That can have an effect by getting you more interested in it. And if you have a team of people, and this is where leadership comes in, if you can engender love of this particular industry, love of the process, love of prospecting, and there's a group that's getting together and swapping stories, and even if they're, had a good day, bad day, whatever it is, a leader can create the conditions to potentially inspire you to find something out along those same lines. And I know, Dave, you do a great job at this, figuring out, why am I doing this? Why am I trying to sell a mortgage? Why am I in this business? Because you're trying to help people. Maybe you've finally gotten to the point where you're so sick of the misinformation out there that it becomes your life work to help people make smart decisions, not to make poor decisions, not to put their financial health in jeopardy because they're not doing what they should be doing in terms of interest rates or term of mortgage or whatever it might be. So if you can inspire as a leader the people to see what you're actually doing this for, how you can give back to people, that's going to be extremely important. The other thing that I'd like to bring up is, and I heard this from a Navy SEAL the other day, and Dave, you've had Jocko on your podcast as well, right?
Yeah, I had Jocko a few months ago. It was a great interview.
And I was talking to somebody, and this really stuck with me from a leadership point of view. And if some of the people out there are leaders and they have people who are there in charge of, I was talking to a Navy SEAL officer who said, Phil, I worked for Jocko, and I will tell you right now that I have never been more engaged, I've never prepared more, and I've never wanted to let somebody down less than Jocko, because he was such a great example, and he was such a great mentor, and he was such a great model, and he gave us and he told us why we were doing this and repeated it over and over and over again. So if you translate that into other team atmospheres, a leader can be inspiring to the point where they are inspiring other people to have passion, to have grit. I mean, this particular platoon commander who was working for Jocko, who was a task unit commander, Jocko's demeanor and his demands and his expectations created unbelievable grit in this particular guy, this particular platoon commander. So it doesn't only have to be a light bulb that goes off over your head and say, oh, I finally found something that I love. I finally found something that I'm interested in. Now I'm going to go off to the races. There are conditions and leaders who can model and who can inspire other people who they work with. And then the last one is, in terms of growing your grit, is sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it's a patience factor, where a lot of people get into different businesses and they want to see things happen now. I've been doing this for 3 months. I've been doing this for 6 months now. And particularly in your industry, where there's a lot of prospecting, there's a lot of planting seeds and referrals and things that don't happen until downstream. That big funnel up top will eventually start spitting people out downstream. But patience is extremely important, and patience can grow grit as well, because it's almost like a muscle. If you continue to be patient, if you continue to focus on that goal, that's serving other people, and you continue to be inspired by others, that grit becomes a muscle. And I think that's probably one of my superpowers, if I had one, is this fact that I have this grit muscle. Because I'll be honest with you, I have changed careers quite a bit. I've had 3, 4, 5 massive changes, from Wall Street to Goldman Sachs, from Goldman Sachs to the SEALs to business school to entrepreneurship, and all of those things have over time created a grit muscle, because you know how to prepare, you know what the process is like, and you know how to go through this process to get very good at something. And I haven't found, or I've been bouncing around a little bit career-wise, 5, 6 years at a time. And at some point, to get that really deep-seated grit, hopefully you will find something that basically everything else is a distraction, and you become that person who digs in on something for 10, 15, 20, 30 years.
No doubt. And so for everyone on this call, while there's a lot that you can take action on from this call, nothing more valuable than getting clear on your values as a mortgage professional, getting clear on your why, and have it be a purpose that's bigger than just closing loans, making commissions. I have made sure in this call, in the handout section, we have the Mortgage Coach Why worksheet. This will not only help you get clear on your mortgage why, but get clear on your mortgage coach why. Why are you on this call? Why are you part of the Mortgage Coach community? Why, when you meet with families, do you want to deliver a total cost analysis? It has to be more than just a tool, more than just a technique to get a better conversion rate and get more referrals. Kelly Zitlow, one of the nation's top loan officers and a great mortgage coach, she's super clear that she wants to, lead with education and transparency, and that is her value proposition. So really recommend, as one takeaway for everyone on this call, you want to grow grit personally, get more purposeful around what you're doing, get more clear on that, and then of course practice. The more you do something, the better you get at it, and the more passion you get. So some super clear takeaways. So Phil, before we wrap up today's call, I know you've got a new endeavor. Obviously, I've become a customer of yours. If you wouldn't mind telling us about your newest adventure from a business perspective. And by the way, everyone, I'm going to put a link. What Phil's going to talk about is, I think it's super valuable for anyone that has kids that are, have the goal of going to college, or you have friends or other family members that have kids that are in that high school age. But tell us about what you're doing, Phil.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I had a fit deck business, a fitness business, a couple of years ago, and after being on Shark Tank, I sold that business and had some time and breathing space, and started getting into this concept of how kids are preparing for college. I have 4 sons coming up the ranks, and got extremely interested in it, and it's become my passion. I went back to school to get credentialed in college counseling, and started counseling kids about 2 years ago. And recently opened up what's called Prepwell Academy, as you can see there up on the screen. And it's an online mentoring program for 9th and 10th graders. It's also 11th and 12th graders, but my big focus is 9th and 10th graders and their parents. And as I alluded to earlier, my superpower is this idea of how to prepare and how to figure out the process in order to achieve greatness, achieve the school that you want to go to. So this whole program is all about what to do, i.e. the preparation, and then the process. What are the steps that a 9th grader and a 10th grader and 11th grader should take in order to position themselves well for college admissions, ultimately picking the right college, the right major, all those types of things. So I've taken everything that I've learned over the last 25 years as it relates to preparation and process, and whether it's military or education or business school or entrepreneurship or the military, whatever the case may be, and I've coalesced it into weekly videos. So once somebody enrolls, they and their parents, I prefer it to be the child, for the child to take, the student to take ownership of this process. But every week starting in 9th grade, and after that they get a video from me, 3-4 minute video, and it basically keeps them on track throughout high school so that they don't miss anything, whether it's meeting a guidance counselor, whether it's choosing their classes. All those types of things are laid out, very organized, so that the student and their parent go through this process with some intelligence, and they don't miss anything big. I typically find people, they wake up junior year and they're like, wait a second, I have to do what for college? And I missed this and I missed that. So this helps solve that problem.
Love it, love it. So folks, I put a link in chat. You can go online, sign up to become part of the community, and just the emails that you get just from a marketing perspective are super valuable. I've got a son who's a freshman in high school who's also an athlete, who's got some goals of what being an athlete might do for school. And Phil, I love the program. I mean, I've already gone through a couple of these videos. I particularly like the one how to organize your computer. I mean, these are things where sometimes we take it for granted, and I've tried to get my kids to be more intentional around how they organize their computer. But to have a guy like you, who has got your background as a Navy SEAL, who went to Yale, you've already achieved at a high level, teaching them the things they need to know to maximize their opportunity. It's awesome. So it's a great program. Check it out. Mortgage Coach community. Let's support Phil Black. Connect with him on social, Facebook, LinkedIn, and I do highly recommend this service for everyone. So, hey, Phil, before we wrap it up, because this question came in, I know we're a little bit over. I'm going to push a poll. I would love to know what people thought of it. But this question came up. I know we did a call on how to overcome objection, but would you mind just closing with a minute of thoughts for someone to say, here's the question. It came from Kevin. He said, Phil, how do we get through the enormous rejection, prospecting, of having to keep focused even when things aren't going well? So think about this for a mortgage professional that is just, things aren't going so well for them, but how do they put up with the enormous objection rejection they get from real estate agents and still stay strong and go? If you wouldn't mind answering that.
Sure. I think part of it is going to be perspective and knowing that you have to get through. I hate to call it a numbers game, but because people say that all the time, but it is a numbers game. You have to get through the bulk of getting the calls in, getting the rejection. I'd love to say make a game out of it, because it's almost laughable, because the services that you provide, and I know some of the technology that Dave provides, it does get frustrating because you have great advice, that you're keeping their best interest in mind, and that there are all these types of challenges, which is I don't have time, I've got somebody, I've got a girl, I've got a guy. So almost make it like before you get on that call, you're like, there may be a rejection here, but I know I'm doing the best that I can. As long as I get to enough people, I have to make multiple calls. The perspective and the patience there has to be there. You can't have the perspective of I'm going to nail every single call, I'm going to nail every single prospecting call. It has to go beyond that. And the other thing is keeping track and being disciplined about making X number of calls per day, X number of prospecting calls per day or per week. And just don't take it personally. That's the other thing. Don't take it personally. Make the phone calls. When I was going through and knocking on those doors, and I was getting absolutely abused by all those recruiters. They said I was too tall. They said my shoulder would never work. I should try somewhere else. That burning desire, knowing that it's inevitable. Remember that inevitable adversity, inevitable failure. Knowing ahead of time that it's coming should be a good thing, because if you're expecting it to be roses and you're expecting it to close 60% of your calls, then it's going to just lead to disappointment. If you know ahead of time that you have that long-term goal, there's a mission bigger than yourself, it's going to be inevitable, there's going to be failure and adversity, having that perspective should at least it's helped me push through those beginning parts where it's going to be a grind.
Well, we did a call on overcoming call reluctancy. That's in our YouTube channel. Also, when I did the interview of Jeremy Forcier, a super successful loan officer, I think he's closing over 40 loans a month right now, and I asked him what are his top 3 priorities day to day and week to week. First of all, he was super clear. It's prospecting 20 hours a week, so he was very clear. That is one of his 3. Obviously, delivering a mortgage coach total cost analysis and being part of every celebration. So a lot of it is just focus. Don't confuse busyness with business. And business is prospecting. And so hopefully this has been helpful. I want to remind everybody, every single Wednesday we're doing mobile training. I have put a link to sign up for tomorrow's class in the chat. Next Tuesday, I'm interviewing Daniel Harkeby. We're going to be talking about his 6 perspectives on leadership. I'm personally really excited to hear that. Every time I have coffee with Daniel, every time I bring him into a call, I get so much value on a personal level. His book, Living Forward, is a best-selling book, and it should be a great call next week. So, Phil, appreciate all the time and all the value today. Folks, hope you got a lot of value from today's call. We definitely got great reviews on this call. Phil, thank you, my friend. I look forward to having you back
you, Dave.
in the Mortgage Coach community.
Sounds great. Thank you much.
Take care, everybody. And remember, go check out Prepwell Academy. We have put a link in below, at least at a minimum, sign up, be part of the community. It's great information. Take care, everybody.